Alright, hi guys. Today we're going to talk about area and circumference formulas of circles. This might not be something that you've hit specifically since back in middle school. You may have talked about it a little bit in some of your other classes, but we're going to review it today. So, first of all, before I get into the area and circumference formulas, I'm going to go off to the side and just give a review of the parts of the circle. So, obviously in the middle we have the center, and halfway from the center to the edge is called the radius. And then if I go all the way across, that is called the diameter. So these are some terms that you should know and you should remember, but just want to make sure we're all on the same page before we go forward. Okay, so the area formula that you've probably heard before is pi r squared, where r is my radius. And the circumference formula, you can write it a couple different ways. I'm going to give you both. So one way is 2 pi r, where r is my radius, or pi times my diameter. And the reason being, you can write it either way, is the radius is just half the diameter. So 2 times my radius is just the same as my diameter. So if my radius was 4, my diameter would be 8. Okay, so those are just saying the same thing, but you might see it written both of those ways. So I wanted to show you that. All right, so on this first page here, it says find the area for circles 1 through 4 and circumference for circles 5 through 8. Again, we're just going to do the odds here and give you guys practice on the evens. But what I want to do is show you kind of both ways that you can write it. And you can choose then after this which way you prefer to write it, but be able to recognize both ways. So area, so pi r squared. I need to be able to recognize what they give me. So this one is a radius. That's 12, okay? Because it's only halfway. So pi 12 squared. Again, I'm going to write it two different ways, and you need to be able to recognize both ways. On a short answer question, you could give me either one. So the first way I can write it is I can simply just do 12 squared. That's 144. And I can write this as 144 pi meters squared. Okay, now notice this is squared because it's area. And that would be my final answer. So I just leave the pi in my final answer. Okay. The other way would be to just type it all in your calculator. Okay, and that would give you a rounded answer. So pi 12 squared. And this way you would obviously need a calculator on. So 452.39 meters squared. Both of these are saying the same thing, and both of them are correct. So I would allow you to write it as either one. Okay? All right, number 3. So this one also gives you a radius. So pi 2.8 squared. So I'm going to show you the first way is just to square that 2.8, and I get 7.84 pi feet squared. And again, just leaving that pi in your final answer. And the other way would just be to type that all in your calculator and to get 20, whoa, there, not what I wanted, and to get 24.63 feet squared. Okay, so that's area. Again, numbers 2 and 4, we didn't do those, but make sure those, it gives you the diameter, so you want the radius. So you'll have to divide that by 2. All right, numbers 5 and 7. All right, so here we're finding the circumference. So my circumference formula is 2 pi r. So 2 pi times 7. Again, we're going to write it both ways just for practice. So 14 pi millimeters. Now, circumference is not going to be squared. Circumference, remember, is just your distance around the outside. It's not squared. So this would be your first way to write it. I think that way is pretty easy because you don't even have to type it in your calculator probably. It's just 14 pi millimeters. The other way would be to type it in your calculator, and you get 43.98 millimeters. Okay. All right, so the next one, number 7. So this one, it gives me the diameter. So I'm going to just use the pi d formula since it gives me the diameter. So my first way would just say 58 pi. because it gives me the diameter and I know I'm just multiplying it by pi, yards. Or you could type that in your calculator and you could get 182.21 yards. The important thing is you can't mix up these two ways of writing it. So I couldn't just put 58 and forget the pi, and I couldn't put 182.21 pi. Okay, so make sure whatever way you choose, you got to stick with it. Okay, all right, find the diameter of a circle with a circumference of 65.97. All right, so it tells me the circumference is 65.97, so that means I know 2 pi r equals 65.97. All right, 2 pi is just a number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by 2 pi. And I think I actually, when I do that on my calculator, I have to put that in parentheses. So when I do that, I get r equals 10.5. Okay, now notice that's not my final answer because that's my radius, which is half of my halfway. So in order to find the diameter, I'm just going to take that and multiply it by 2. So therefore, my diameter equals 21 meters. All right, next one, find the radius of a circle with circumference 35 pi yards. So again, it gives you the circumference, so you're using that formula 2 pi r equals 35 pi. All right, so what do you notice on both sides of the equation? You notice a pi, so I'm going to just go ahead and cross that out. So 2r equals 35, okay? And we're trying to find the radius, so then I'm just going to divide both sides by 2. And when I divide both sides by 2, I get my radius equals 17.5 yards. All right, next one, find the diameter of a circle with an area of 615.75. So notice what they give you. That's going to tell you what formula to use. So an area of 615.75. So pi r squared equals 615.75. All right, and we'll deal with what they want you to find at the end. Okay, the diameter, we'll have to manipulate that. All right. So the first thing I can do is divide both sides by pi. Remember, pi is just a number. So when I get that, I get r squared equals 196. All right, so if I have r squared, how do I get r? I have to take the square root, and the square root of 196 is going to be 14. All right, so if r equals 14, how do you find the diameter? Well, you're just going to multiply that by 2. So when you multiply that by 2, you get your diameter is going to be 28 centimeters. Okay, a couple more left. Find the area of a circle with circumference of 26 pi. Again, don't deal with what you're trying to find until the very end. Deal with what you are given. It tells you the circumference is 26 pi. So that means 2 pi r equals 26 pi. All right, so I can cross out my pi on both sides and I get 2r equals 26. Okay, so divide both sides by 2. R equals 13. Now that I have my radius, I can go find my area of my circle. So pi 13 squared. 13 squared is 169. So I'm just going to leave it as 169 pi feet squared. Again, you could type that in your calculator if you wanted to, but I can also just leave it like that with the pi at the end. So again, how do you find out what to set it equal to? You're looking at what you are given. Deal with what you're trying to find at the very end. All right, find the circumference of a circle with an area of 201. So I'm given the area, so pi r squared equals 201.06. All right, so I can divide both sides by pi. R squared equals 64. take the square root of that, and r equals 8. So once I have my radius, then I can find my circumference. 2 pi times 8. I'm just going to simplify 2 times 8 to give me 16 pi inches. Alright, last one. Find the area of a circle with a circumference of 18.84. Again, I'm given the circumference, so that's what I'm going to set it equal to. 2 pi r equals 18.84. Divide both sides by 2 pi. Again, put that in parentheses in your calculator when you type it in. And r equals 3. So then you go back and you find the area. So pi 3 squared. 3 squared is 9. So 9 pi yards squared would be your area. Okay, so that's it for area and circumference. We will be using this in a couple days. Also when we work on finding the volume of 3D figures. And that's all.